So it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Shlomit Flaisher-Grinberg, professor of psychology at St. Francis University in Pennsylvania and coordinator of the Animal Assisted Health and Education Program. Dr. Flaisher-Grinberg's work lies at the intersection of neuroscience, psychology, and human-animal studies. Her research explores the neurobehavioral foundations of emotional regulation, trauma, attachment, and well-being, with particular attention to the human-animal bond and to the lived experiences of animals themselves, including shelter animals. Her work offers a crucial bridge between empirical neuroscience and the relational ethical questions raised by human-animal encounters. Shlomit, I'm delighted to invite you to begin your talk.
Thank you so much, Anat, and it is my pleasure to be here today and speak with you about the neurobiology of the human-animal bond. My name is Shlomit Flaisher-Grinberg, and I am a professor of psychology at St. Francis University, Pennsylvania, where I also serve as the director for the Animal-Assisted Healthcare and Education minor and for the Neuroscience Interdisciplinary minor. In my talk today, I would like to start with the definition of the human-animal bond with some applications and terminology. I will then talk about the immense body of knowledge that suggests that the human-animal bond or interactions between humans and animals offer great benefits to the humans within the partnerships. I will talk about some of the neurobiological mechanisms which may mediate these benefits to humans. However, I will also claim that currently our knowledge about the effect of the bond or the interactions on animals are incredibly limited and inconsistent. I will claim that if we are looking at the interaction between humans and animals from a relational reciprocal approach, and we complement it by human knowledge as to the rich and complicated experience of animals, their ability to learn, to think, to remember, and to feel, then we have a moral, ethical, and scientific obligation to assure that benefits to humans within the bond are not achieved at the expense of the animals, and that we are able to assess and to assure the benefits of animals within the bond, protect them from stress and harm. I'm going to talk a little bit about the implications of this knowledge to therapy and to human-animal interactions, and leave some time for questions and answers. So to get started, if we are looking at the definition of the human-animal bond, we find that it defines the interactions between humans and animals as dynamic relationships in which we can expect reciprocal mutual benefits that significantly enhances the lives of both parties, whether on a cognitive, social, or emotional, or physiological level. We find animals integrated into human lives in a variety of ways. Some animals live in our homes, some live in the wild, and some are integrated into a field that we may refer to as human-oriented services. Animals in human-animal or human-oriented services may serve as working animals, meaning that they work side by side with policemen, with military. Animals may be defined as service animals or emotional support animals. These are two very different groups of animals. And animals can also be integrated into animal-assisted interventions. For instance, in animal-assisted therapy, we can expect a credentialed therapist who partners with an animal to supply or to provide a structured, goal-oriented, and documented therapeutic process. In difference from animal-assisted therapy, in animal-assisted activities, the human is not always a therapist, and the process is not always as structured or goal-oriented. If we're looking at animal-assisted education, we may look at an educator who partners with an animal in the goal of improving the educational process. As we can see, the field of animal-assisted interventions has worked really hard to unify the terminology, to clarify the roles of animals and people, and to develop skills and competencies that attempt to assure that benefits, again, to people are not achieved at the expense of stress or harm to the animals. When we are looking at human-animal interactions, and that concept is seen across a variety of animal species, different human populations, different types of interactions, a robust body of knowledge tells us that human-animal interactions are incredibly beneficial to humans. They can support human emotional functioning, so trust, rapport sharing, cognitive functioning, attention, decision-making, psychosocial and physiological function. And we actually do know what are some of the neurobiological mechanisms that modulate these benefits to people. So to talk about these benefits, or to talk about the benefits to people, I'm going to focus on two domains, the domain of trauma and stress, and the domain of social connectedness, love, sharing, and bonding. In order to explain the benefits of the human-animal bond to humans who have sustained trauma, we first have to understand the neurobiology of trauma. And trauma is usually attributed to the experience of events that cause immense fear, helplessness, horror, that has the potential to risk the integrity of the mind or the body of the individual, and that activates the stress response of our bodies. So the stress response is a response that activates the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. It recruits systems such as the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal gland, and it enables us to recruit and mobilize energy, glucose, oxygen to the brain, to the muscles, fight or flight, and increase our chances of survival. It is quite recognized that when it comes to stress, acute short-term stress or mild stress is adaptive. Again, it mobilizes energy, glucose, it improves attention, and it enables us to fight, flight, survive. The problem is when the stress becomes chronic, it is prolonged, it is repeated, it is severe, it is traumatic, it is unpredictable, or it is uncontrollable. In that case, stress becomes maladaptive, and it starts to take detrimental toll on human function and welfare. From a neuroendocrine standpoint, we see that stress increases the release of cortisol, that is a stress hormone that is released from the adrenal gland. And one of its jobs is to increase metabolism of energy. At the same time, it suppresses the immune system, meaning that when we are in fight-flight mode, we are less likely to suffer from infections or inflammations. The problem is, of course, is that when the stress becomes chronic or is traumatic, the suppression of the immune response actually makes us more susceptible to infections and inflammation later on. From a neurochemical standpoint, we see that the stress response increases the release of adrenaline and noradrenaline in the body and the brain. Adrenaline and noradrenaline increase heart rate, increase blood pressure, suppress digestion, because in fight-flight, digestion is not the most important thing, and again, improve survival. The problem is that when the chronic becomes traumatic, or when it becomes chronic, we start to see blood pressure disorders, we see cardiovascular dysfunction, and we may see digestive dysregulation. Chronic traumatic stress reduces the availability of serotonin, in the brain, in the body, which may promote states of arousal, vigilance, startle, anxiety, impulsivity, which are symptoms that we may see in an individual who sustained chronic or traumatic stress or who had sustained trauma. If we're looking at the brain, we can look at structures, the amygdala. Our amygdala is in charge of detecting danger and reacting to it. And we can see that chronic traumatic stress increases the activity of the amygdala, promotes hypervigilance, but also impairs the ability of the amygdala to discriminate threat from non-threat. The hippocampus, an area that makes memories and helps with the regulation of emotions, reacts to chronic stress by atrophy. It literally degenerates. Neurons are dying. And the ability of the hippocampus to regenerate and rewires, we call it the neuroplasticity of the brain, or neurogenesis, the birth of new neurons and creation of new synapses in the brain, is also reduced. It means that chronic traumatic stress interferes with the formation of memories. It enhances the encoding of fear memories, and it fosters the realization, numbing, and dissociations, which we may see in trauma. If we're looking at the cortex, different areas of the cortex, we can see that this is an area or areas incredibly important for decision-making, for logic, for working memory, attention, emotional regulation. And these areas also degenerate upon chronic traumatic stress, which may explain faulty decision-making, lack of inhibitions, dysregulated executive functioning. In general, it is quite accepted within the field that chronic traumatic stress lead to the degeneration of the brain literally atrophies, and also decrease neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to regenerate itself. And that these processes are at the core of human maladaptive conditions, from affective disorders to anxiety and pain disorders, to neurodegenerative disorders such as Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. If we are again to turn to the human-animal bond, we find that the interaction with animals in humans has the potentials to reduce stress, to alleviate anxiety, to decrease depression, loneliness, pain, to improve positive emotions, create a sense of purpose, self-esteem. And we believe that the mechanisms that modulate these benefits have to do with the systems that we have described. So interactions between human and animals, especially when they are affiliative, when they are positive, have the capability to lower cortisol levels in humans, to decrease heart rate, to normalize heart rate variability, to decrease blood pressure, alleviate pain, improve the function of the immune response. And in fact, these benefits are seen they're especially pronounced during stressful situations to humans or when they undergo painful medical procedures. These findings suggest that animals can help people buffer stress, stabilize the sympathetic nervous system, improve the response of the parasympathetic nervous system, this is rest and digest, and decrease the detrimental effect of stress. If we are looking at the brain, we find that human-animal interactions increase the activity of the frontal cortex, side by side with improved positive emotion, emotional regulation, and executive function. We also find that these interactions decrease the activity of the amygdala, either directly or indirectly, because increased activity of the frontal cortex decrease the activity of the amygdala. These two areas are connected. And although I could not find any support to these hypotheses, we can at least theorize that the interactions between humans and animals can also assist in protecting areas such as the frontal cortex and the hippocampus from stress-induced neurodegeneration and actually facilitate neurogenesis. A different domain as to the neurobiology of human-animal interaction has to do with social connectedness. And humans, also animals, of course, have immense need to belong, to feel closeness, support, and connect. One of the systems that modulates social connectedness is oxytocin, a hormone that is produced in the hypothalamus. It is released during childbirth and lactation, and it is believed to facilitate a variety of social relationships, from parental attachment to pair bonding, friendship formation, trust. And in fact, we believe that it is important for some very complicated and complex social types of interactions. So, for instance, empathy, the ability to share, to understand, to respond with care to the affective states of others, is supported by oxytocin. A theory of mind, that is the ability to understand that other people, other organisms really see, think, want, believe, desire things different than ourselves, is a theory of mind, which again relies on oxytocin availability in some ways. When we are looking into the interactions between human and animals, we find that during such interactions, there is increased release of oxytocin. We do believe that oxytocin is released during stressful situations, and it acts to promote social contact. By itself, oxytocin antagonizes the synthesis and release of cortisol. It decreases amygdala activation, it increases pain threshold, and it supports the inflammatory response and digestive enhancement system. So again, if we're looking at the human-animal bond, we find that during affiliative interactions between human and animals, we see increase in oxytocin release in humans, which is seen side by side with improved function, decreased stress, and decreased pain, which again suggests that animals may help humans buffer effects of stress and improve connectedness and bonding. However, as the benefits of human-animal interactions to humans are becoming clear, as we understand more and more as to the neurobiological social cognitive processes that facilitate such benefits, the actual benefits, cost, risks, and consequences to the animal are not clear. They are inconsistent. Research is limited. Research, it is not always measurable because it is incredibly hard to measure and assess stress in an animal without stressing the animal. But it is of extreme importance to assure that within the human-animal interaction, animals are benefited and they're not negatively impacted. So if we're going back to the definition of the human-animal bond, we find that it calls for mutual reciprocal exchange of benefits between human and animals that acknowledge the personality of the animal, the agency, the sentience, the freedom to choose, and that calls for prevention of stress and harm to the animal. If we take that perspective offered to us by the reciprocal approach or the relational approach to human-animal interactions, and we complement it by the current knowledge as to the ability of animals to experience rich and complicated emotional, cognitive, and social lives, then we absolutely must consider the fact, or we must acknowledge, that within the human-animal bond, the value of the animal is not tied to its benefit to the people. Rather, the value of the animal is rooted to the needs, to the feelings, to the sentience and agency of the animals. Let me give you a little bit of a glimpse into the current knowledge as to the complex capacity of animals to feel, to think, to remember, as it connects to the human-animal bond and to its neurobiology. We've always known that animals have incredible capability to learn, to remember, to act upon their knowledge. However, we are unraveling the fact that animals have far more advanced capability to learn and remember, and that in fact animals are capable of creativity and innovation and problem solving. In the laboratory of Kelly Crawford, rats learn to drive low motorized vehicles. Aside from being pretty cool, what this research actually suggests is that enriched environments, interactions, learning enables better emotional resilience and better connectedness between animals and people. If we're looking at birds a lot of time are looked down at in our society. We literally have the word, the bird brain, this phrase, a bird brain, which suggests that brains of birds is simplistic. However, birds are capable of learning, remembering, and problem solving. So, for instance, New Caledonian crows can easily learn to use a hook to pick up a little bucket and get their food out of a container. But in a groundbreaking research, it has been found that one crow, her name is Betty, who did not have a hook, she had a straight wire, was able, would have never seen it being done before, to create a hook and get her food. And the ability to solve problems with creativity and innovation has been demonstrated across multiple species. We know that animals communicate in a variety of ways. They communicate through smell and touch. We know that animals attend to human language. But using advanced technology such as fMRI, this is functional magnetic resonance imaging that look at the activity of the brain in action, we know today that animals, for instance, dogs, have far more advanced as to the understanding of human language than we thought before. We have heard, and we will hear again, of course, about the complex emotional lives of animals, their capacity for shame, guilt, sadness, grief. But animals are also capable of what we may call emotional contagion. And emotional contagion is the ability to perceive emotion in someone else and react in a similar emotional fashion. So it's the ability to see someone frowning and frown, to see someone smiling and feel the joy of the smile within ourselves. It has been shown that rats enjoy tickling, and when they're tickled, they laugh and they jump around. And other rats who are watching rats being tickled react with emotional contagious of joy. They laugh and they jump around. Contagious yawning is a very well-known phenomena. It happens when someone yawns. When we think about yawning, we see yawning, we imagine yawning, and the muscles of our face just feel the need to yawn as well. This is a very strong communicative behavior. People yawn when other people yawn. Dogs yawn when people yawn. And in fact, it has been demonstrated that dogs do not need to see their people yawning in order to yawn. They can hear people yawning and they will yawn. It has been demonstrated that pigs, when they see pigs yawning, they may yawn as well. It has been shown that primates are capable of theory of mind. They understand the act of another primate and why they do what they do, even if their actions are led by false beliefs. And it has been shown that primates are incredibly sensitive to inequity and they strive for fairness. So, for instance, a primate would be willing to trade a rock for a cucumber, but they become frustrated when they see another primate trading that rock for a grape, which has higher value. And they actually may refuse to participate if another ape is receiving the grape with no effort at all. So again, the ability to compare ourselves to another and to understand equity. Now, we know some of the neurobiological mechanisms underlying these social cognition functions. So empathy, and theory of mind. Mirror neurons are neurons that can be found in different areas of the brain, in motor cortex, sensory motor cortex. We find them in emotional areas. And these mirror neurons are activated when we see someone else performing an act, when we understand why they do that and how they feel about it. Mirror neurons enable us to mirror other organisms' behaviors and emotions in our brain so we can understand, we can empathize, and we can relate. And when it comes to animals, it has been demonstrated that animals have mirror neurons across similar areas of the brain, and that these mirror neurons may actually participate in pro-social empathetic help behaviors. It has been shown that when rats are placed in a restrainer, which absolutely stress them, a free rat will become stressed as well, will invest energy into trying to assist the trapped rats, and will find a way to release the trapped rat from the container, even at no benefits to themselves. Dogs have been shown to release their trapped humans, and this behavior is enhanced when the humans are behaving with distress. So what does it mean? If we're taking the definition of the human-animal bond, if we are acknowledging animal sentience and rich emotional lives, if we take into account the fact that, again, research as to the effect of the human-animal bond on animals is scarce, is inconsistent, there is very low bit consensus, and that there are potential benefits to animals intertwined with welfare threats, we absolutely have to ask ourselves, does the integration of animals into the human-animal interactions promote human well-being at the expense of animal well-being? A little bit of what it is that we do know. We do know that animals can suffer stress and they can suffer trauma. And their neurobiology reaction to stress and trauma is similar to that of people. Animals also have the need to connect, and they benefit from social connection in the same fashion that humans do. We know that when human-animal interactions occur, for instance, in human-dog interactions, and both the human and the dog are familiar to one another, or the dog is coming from a background of a very stressed environment, such as shelter, these interactions have the potential to increase oxytocin and decrease cortisol, buffering stress and improving well-being in the animal. However, these findings, again, are not always consistent. There is research that shows that in some interactions between humans and animals, cortisol actually increase, oxytocin does not increase. And there is research that shows that in some cases, benefit to people are achieved while the animal actually shows increased anxiety, decreased selective attention, and increased cortisol that stand in immediate correlation between benefits to people and harm to animals. Research that tried to understand where this inconsistency comes from suggests that in the human-animal interaction, animals may show a stress response when the interaction is too frequent, it is prolonged, when the animal is interacting with people they're not familiar with or in a novel environment, when there is no sense of control or predictability for the animal, and when the animal is required to perform behaviors that are not natural to the animal, such as standing or sitting in calm demeanor for a prolonged amount of time. Research also suggests that sometimes it's the termination of the interaction or the transportation to the interaction that actually stress an animal. So shelter dogs have been shown to decrease cortisol upon affiliative human-animal interactions, but these cortisol levels increase back up when the dogs return to the shelter. And both dogs and rabbits have been shown to increase cortisol levels when transported back and forth to the interaction. The topic that keeps me awake at night is that social, empathetic nature of animals, the emotional contagious, and synchronization between humans and animals. It has been shown that dogs, for instance, will synchronize their stress level to their people, whether their people are suffering acute or chronic stress. And if we're building on the knowledge as to the empathetic pro-social neurobiology and behavior of animals, then we absolutely must take into consideration the idea that when we are bringing an animal into an interaction where people are stressed, we inherently cause stress to the animal. What does it mean? It means that we have to shift our mindset within human-animal interactions. We have to stop asking ourselves, what can animals do for people? And start asking ourselves, what can people do for animals? We have to change terminology because terminology both construct and reflect our reality. We absolutely must eradicate the idea that we use animals because the use of animal terminology or conceptually contradict the entire premise that animals have sentience, agency, freedom, and ability to choose. We have to develop ethical code and guidelines for competencies into human-animal interactions, and we'll hear a lot more about it today. And we have to improve our ability to understand animal communication, to assess welfare, and focus on the animal well-being within the interaction. Take-home messages. Human-animal interactions can be incredibly beneficial to humans and potentially to animals. But the study of the effects of the human-animal interactions, especially the neurobiology of that, on animals is yet incredibly limited. We have a moral obligation to assure that the integration of animals into the interaction does not promote human well-being at the expense of the animal well-being. And we have a scientific obligation to find ways to advance our knowledge in regarding to the reciprocal effects of the human-animal bond in a way that respect the animal and protect the animal from stress and harm. With this, I'm going to run through a few slides of the references I used to construct the talk today. I will thank you for your time and attention.